Hey guys, today we're going to be talking about wave management. You probably, have a basic idea, but I just want to, go over a bunch of different situations here and show like what we're looking to do. We'll be kind of looking at this through the lens of bot lane, but of course, a lot of the same concepts apply to solo lanes as well. And even if you're a jungler, knowing how, laners are looking to manipulate their waves, or how you can help them get good recalls off is super important for playing the game well. So in general, in bot lane, if you have a duo bot that is like a tank engage support or some kind of support that wants a lot of room to fight, generally you're going to want to try to keep your wave on your side of the lane further back, because this is going to allow you to have more room to engage on the enemy bot lane. And it's, again, the same concept if you're in top or mid. So if you're playing a champion that you want to all-in your opponent, giving yourself more space to do that rather than permanently shoving in the wave is going to be really helpful for accomplishing what you're looking to do with the wave. Oftentimes I see AD carry players playing with like a tank melee support, and they're unfortunately just shoving the wave, up to here or into the enemy turret over and over again just because they can. And we have to remember that taking space in League doesn't always mean winning. And so just because we can push our lane doesn't mean it's actually always the right thing to do. So for example, especially the higher up you go, the better people are able to cope with last hitting minions under turret. And so it's actually better a lot of cases if you have the option and control over the lane. If you're just looking to deny minions and you don't care about anything else and you're not looking to fight, a lot of times freezing, especially the higher up you go, is going to have a bigger impact on your ability to win games than just shoving into their tower over and over again. And again, if you're with a support that's looking to all in, like a tank engage support, why would you be pushing into the turret? Your support has no room to engage without just ending up tanking the turret. So they're kind of put in this spot where they're kind of a useless champion in that situation and can't do anything, and you're exposing yourself to getting ganked over and over again. And if you're an AD carry that just kind of mindlessly pushes your wave into turret over and over again, and then you get confused, why your support isn't able to do anything the whole game, or get ganked over and over again and then blame your jungler for not being able to deal with the enemy jungler, rather than recognizing that maybe manipulating your wave in a way that puts you in a less vulnerable position to get ganked or enables your support better, is going to be a lot better for you in the long run. Now, if they're playing a support that is more skill shot oriented, and a lot of times this is going to be poke supports, but even certain tank engage supports, this can be the case on, such as Thresh and Nautilus and Pyke. Usually with these hook champions, similar to poke champions, they actually need, sure, you want the space, but they need to have room around minions in order to be able to actually hook the opponents easily. And so in a situation where you have a support like that, you may want to give up some of the space that you have in order to fight, like give up having a longer lane for them to engage on, and instead give them a thinned wave, or a very neutral wave, where there's not a lot of enemy minions on their way in their way, so that their angles open up for hitting their hooks. For poke supports, you definitely want to be shoving, because they're both going to be able to hit the turret with you and help take plates faster in a way that tank supports aren't usually going to be able to do anything if you're up at the turret. And they're also actually going to be able to land a lot of free harass and poke at the enemy turret. And not only that, but also depending on the champion, again, if they're skill shot reliant and their skill shot can't go through minions, you can enable them to hit more abilities by thinning out the wave, and giving them that kind of situation. So in a lot of range versus range matchups, or if you just have a range support in general, it can be good to give them more space to work with. So that's kind of the basics of what you would want to do to enable different types of supports. But then, of course, one of the most important things that we're doing when we're manipulating our wave, especially for other roles, is really centered around recall timings and gank timings. And so what I mean by that is, like, we're wanting to push the wave to initially give ourselves some sort of advantage and power spike. And so we're pushing as hard as we can to get level 2, you know, unless it's a matchup where we know we're 100% not getting level 2 no matter what. And so we're pushing the wave and trying to get level 2 first, because that's such a big advantage. Even for level 3, right, we're just trying to hard shove the wave and get level 3 first. Same thing for level 6, we're just trying to kind of hard shove the wave and potentially give ourselves level 6 first. Now, if we're going to hard shove the wave and we happen to be hitting level 6 right as the minion, you know, right as their minion wave is dying, and so we no longer have any room to fight, like this actually just happened with me now. I hit level 6, but then we're into the enemy turret. I just show that I'm hitting level 6 and can't do anything off of it. So that's not always the best. But in general, you're going to contest the push, especially if you can. The lower rank you are, regardless of the matchup, you're going to be able to potentially outpush and get level 2 just by outmaneuvering your opponent, even in a matchup where you shouldn't necessarily be able to. For example, let's say Karma versus Braum, a really classic matchup. Braum should never be able to get level 2 first versus a Karma. But if Karma, you know, is like bronze and neglecting to auto the minions over and over again level 1, it's totally possible for a Braum to use his Targon stacks and just weave in autos when he can onto the minion wave, with, you know, when he's in a situation to do so without being heavily poked for it. And the Braum player could probably actually manage to snag level 2. That's just kind of a reality of playing in solo queue and playing at low ranks where, you know, the game working a certain way just doesn't really work that way at that rank. Now, the higher up you go, and as soon as you even get into like a moderate rank, of course, you're going to interesting ping spike here, you're going to get into higher ranks where that's not possible, and so you're going to make the decision to consciously not push for level 2, because you know that in this matchup it's not really possible for you to get level 2 first versus a competent player. And so when you see them start to do things that show that they're a competent player, like pushing the wave, you know, so they're going to get level 2 first, you can just kind of concede the fact that they're going to get level 2 first and mitigate their ability to all in you as a result. You know, and basically you're looking to lose gracefully, so that when you have the opportunity to be even with them in level and fight them again, you'll actually be able to take advantage of it. So, you know, okay, so we have that, you know, contesting the level spikes, but we were talking about gank timings and recall timing. So essentially, you know, really big part of League is that there are going to be certain times that you're just going to get ganked at. So generally speaking, since a lot of times we're hoping to push for level 2 first and get some sort of advantage from fighting level 2 to level 1, after we fight level 2, once that fight finishes, usually around 2:30, we can drop a ward for our lane. And what I really like about warding at around 2:30 is that the ward lasts long enough that you're going to see somebody who's coming and like 3 camping you, you know, before they get to you. So it's quite an early ward, because it's going to enable you to actually see somebody who's skipping camps to come fight you. But you're also going to see, because it's going to last more than 30 seconds, you're actually going to end up seeing them even if they come in after they finish their full clear at like 3:10, 3:15, something like this. So when you hear people say that there's this, you know, classic like 3:15 gank timing or something like that, you know, understand that that gank timing is like the latest, well, not the latest time that they could possibly gank you. Of course, if they end up clearing slow, especially in lower ranks, it could be slower than that. But for the most part, right, you want to not just ward when that jungler who's full clearing is going to be finished with their full clear and ganking you. You want to ward in a way that's going to cover most of your gank timings. So you're going to, you know, try to shove for level 2, get that ward down, and then that's going to protect you for level 3. You know, if they're 3 camping or something like that. Another way that you can deal with this is when the third wave comes, which is a cannon wave, like this one here. When that wave comes, you can just try to hard shove and take a recall. And what that's going to do is you're probably not going to have a lot of gold to buy very much, but it will give you an item advantage. Support main, by the way, as I butcher all this CS. But you know, it is going to give you an item advantage, and it's going to allow you to do what's called fading that gank. And so you're going to be off the map when they're looking to gank you, and that's really big because you just don't give them the option to gank you at all. And so if you can shove this third wave in, you know, especially if you're in this winning situation where you've gotten level 2 first, you've you know, had control over the push and over the wave, you got your ward down so you know that you're safe from some sort of early gank, and then you just push and you recall and you get, you know, longsword or a dagger or boots or something basic, and you just use that to get a, you know, a slight item advantage that you can come back into lane with. It's small, but it's big early into the game because, if we talked about before, the earlier into the game you are, the bigger the advantages that you're going to get from even a small item advantage. Because if you have 100 AD and you get a longsword, which is 10 AD, that's going to be a 10% increase in the amount of attack damage that you have. Whereas if you're later in the game and you get the same longsword and you have 200 or 300 AD, it's, you know, now going to be like a 3%, you know, increase in your total AD. So, you know, it's going to be big even though it's just a small item. So if you can afford to go back and get even just a longsword or boots or something basic, while also preventing yourself from ever dying to that gank, that's going to be really good, because a lot of times if their jungler was pathing to you, they'll finish their clear, and then they'll just have nowhere to gank, and so oftentimes they'll just reset and not get the opportunity to get extra gold or impact the map at all. And of course, if your jungler is going to the opposite side of the map, and this is important too, because you're not gonna do this probably if your jungler is pathing down towards you, but you're gonna do it if you know, if your jungler is pathing away from you. What's really good about that cheater recall, or fading that gank at that time, is that, let's say my jungler path top, and so that's one of the reasons why I want to do this, to protect myself and take this early recall. You know, as a bot lane, if my jungler is pathing top, if my jungler gets a kill top and we've just recalled and there was no possible play on us whatsoever, we've just guaranteed that we've played the weak side well enough that our team's just automatically getting an advantage from it. I mean, even if the gank that they do top doesn't result in them getting a kill, if they blow summoner spells and get the top laner some sort of advantage, or get him a really nice recall and the enemy top laner loses a lot of CS, as long as they get something positive from it, it's good. And the expected result over a lot of games is that you are going to get a big positive advantage from them doing that. You know, another situation here, because I don't want to just focus on bot lane, same thing goes, you know, in reverse for top lane. Let's say that you're playing top lane and your jungler is pathing down towards bot. Well, rather than opening yourself up to just getting killed and traded for your jungler, you know, making that gank happen bot, instead, what if we proactively, you know, planned out shoving wave 3 into the enemy turret and then recalling, so that we're just not on the map in order to get ganked, knowing that our jungler's not coming to protect us, and that's a, you know, very classic time that the enemy jungler could come. Now, if we want to stay for one reason or another, maybe we, you know, have you know, gotten some sort of advantage in lane, but it hasn't translated into gold yet. For example, we've managed in the first 3 waves to poke our lane opponent down really heavily, but we haven't killed them. We haven't gotten any sort of CS advantage off of it or anything like that. And so we don't have an advantage from it, but they're obviously in a bad situation we don't really want to leave. If we're in a situation like that, then maybe we want to stay, but then we're going to use that ward in order to protect ourselves. Now, as we move later on, right, whether we recall or not, and again, you might choose not to recall if your jungler is coming towards your lane, so you might shove in wave 3, but then instead of recalling, you might, and this is very, very basic, but very important for wave management. When you shove the wave into the enemy turret, it will bounce back towards your side. The reason why it's going to do this is because it's going to kill all of your minions, which is going to make it easier for their wave to push. And then if any of your minions are left, their reinforcements will reach their turret first, because their turret is on their side of the map. So just in general, if we're thinking about, you know, a line down the middle of the lane here, or down the middle of the map, if the minion wave is stopping on their side of the map, even if it looks like our wave is pushing now, this is a perfect example right here, we have more minions pushing now, but eventually this is going to bounce back into us, because their next wave, well, actually ours is too big in this case, but their next wave is going to reinforce their wave faster. So essentially, if So the gist of it is that when you shove the wave into the enemy turret, it's going to bounce back into you. It's going to slow push back into you. So what you're looking to do is you can bounce that third wave if your jungler is looking to gank. Bounce the wave off of the turret, and then the wave is going to slow push back into you, and then you can set your jungler up for a good gank because the enemy's lane is pushing away from them. You can do the same thing in top lane, etc. So it's quite a good play if your jungler is pathing towards you to stay in your lane, shove the wave into the turret if you have control of the wave and you can, and then let it bounce, and then they'll gank on wave 4 or so, at that 3:15 or slightly later timing. And if you don't have control of the wave and you're getting shoved in, well, that's fine too, because you're going to be on your side of the map. And as your jungler starts to come in, you're shoved in like this. There's people on the other side of the lane, and you might just, thin the wave a little bit so that when you do fight them, you're in more of an even wave, or aren't running into the biggest wave in the world. You're not taking extra damage from it. You're not missing a ton of CS while the gank is going on. You're just thinning the wave to set yourself up for that play that is coming. So once we get away from these jungle gank timings originally in the beginning of the game, there's still ways that we can manipulate the minion wave. So while it's harder to know, like, hey, my jungler is probably looking to gank at this time, we can see our jungler at all times on the map. So it's really important to pay attention to where your jungler is. And if he's pathing back down towards you, a lot of times junglers are just going to full clear, and they're going to have to, a lot of times, if they want to be efficient, if they were to just full clear, let's say like bot to top, for example, they're going to have to do that again because their first camp to respawn is going to be their camps down here on the bot side. So if you're the top laner and you've, done all this stuff, and so you've, pushed and gotten level 2 first, you shove the third cannon wave into the enemy turret, and then the wave bounced back into you, and then you fought here with your jungler when he ganked after he finished his full clear, you're going to come back into lane, and it's actually very likely that a similar setup is going to happen again, just at a slightly different timing. So your jungler is probably going to have to come down here and start the camps that he initially started. And then as his camps slowly respawn up towards topside, he's going to finish his camps and come back up towards topside. Now, this isn't always going to be the case. Sometimes, especially again in lower elos, junglers are going to let their camps sit and prioritize moving to a certain area, or they're going to, and this can potentially happen even higher up, use that timing to do something else, and then use the fact that they used that timing to do something else to flip the order in which they're doing their camps, which is pretty inefficient because of how long you're leaving your camps up for, but can be nice because it can really throw off the other team in terms of where you're going to be and what your pathing looks like. And so jungle pathing is pretty standard right now because a lot of times we're looking at full clearing, and a lot of times we're looking at full clearing in the same direction over and over and over again. And so it can be very predictable. And because of that, we should be using our minion wave and the way that we're manipulating our minion wave in order to avoid ganks and set up ganks, right? And so just like before, if our jungler is going to the other side of the map and we don't know where the enemy jungler is, the last place we want to be is like stuck frozen, right in front of the enemy turret, pushed really far up. What we want to do instead is either be crashing and going away, by either recalling or sitting back for a while and just waiting, out the gank, or we want to be frozen here in a safe side of our map. We don't want to freeze with too big of a wave building up if we're worried about the enemy jungler coming, because we could potentially get dove, although that's less likely to happen the lower you are. And of course, if you are going to get dove, if you're in a situation where you're going to get dove, it's really important that you thin the minion wave before they dive you, because it will mean that if you can kill off the whole minion wave, they basically just can't dive because of how much earlier they'll take tower aggro from your turret. And so it can be really good if you're about to get dove to just clear out as much of the minion wave as you can to prevent them from diving you. If you can even, I know it sounds crazy to do 2v3, but if you can even hold the minion wave here, once your minions die for your next wave, but manage to, you know, hold it here and then get out safely. A lot of times their jungler is going to be walking around back here. If he's all the way back here, you know, you're going to be able to hold that minion wave and prevent it from crashing, and all of a sudden their opportunity to dive on that wave has been delayed a whole nother wave, which gives you time to both thin the wave, maybe get some help coming to you, and other things. So, you know, that can be really good. Generally speaking, if you're going to get dough, you either need to, you know, like fend off the waves so that they can't dive as easily, or decide that you're going to try to outplay the dive and just sit under your turret and let them do what they're going to do and do your best to counter it. Or of course, if you see them doing something like that and you know that you can't thin the wave, you can't stop it from coming in, you're severely outnumbered and much weaker than them and can't outplay the dive, then of course you should walk off your turret even if you're going to be missing CS, or going at a slight disadvantage because of that, because it's a lot better than missing the CS and dying. You know, so in general, right, if we're trying to enable a gank, we're going to try to freeze the wave here. If we're trying to, you know, push and take turret plates because we're very in control of the lane, and we, you know, have range advantage, we're the type of bot lane that wants to be farming turret plates for free, you know, then we can be shoving as long as we have good vision, we're warded up, we're paying attention to where our jungler is, where the enemy jungler is. So how do we accomplish these things? So first off, like, to get a freeze, they're not always going to hand it to you on a silver platter, but there's kind of two ways that you can get a freeze. One would just be to stop autoing as much as the enemy and stop using as many abilities, if any, on the minion wave, just so that they're dealing more damage to the minions than you are, so that the wave is naturally getting pushed into you, but then don't let them crash it. And so that can either mean holding it physically, or just thinning it down enough that, you know, your minion wave ends up crashing with it here and they get kind of stuck in a bad spot where they're not really getting any turret plates or able to, you know, really pressure you down under turret, but they're also as overextended as they can be. And that's a great way to set up a gank, or to just play safe when you're worried about getting ganked. The way that you would do this if you're against better players who are not just going to, you know, if you start slowing down your auto attacks and showing that you want to get pushed in and want to freeze, a lot of good players are not just going to give that to you for free, because it's obviously putting them at a disadvantage. So how do you force a freeze? You'd have to be in control of the lane enough to shove into the enemy turret so you get that minion wave to bounce back. Once that minion wave bounces back, you can freeze it outside of your turret. So those are ways that you can set up a freeze. Now, if we want to be pushing, there's several reasons why we might want to do that. Again, if we want to take turret plates, maybe we have jungle priority bot, like our jungler is playing for bot, and we're looking to dive instead of, you know, instead of doing that. Or maybe we're really low rank and people are really struggling to CS under turret, and so it's just a good strategy for us, compared to freezing, to just shove into the enemy turret. So if we're wanting to dive, we want to build up as big of a minion wave as possible. And since we want to build up as big of a minion wave as possible, what we're looking to do is, you know, not just push the enemy minion wave as hard as we can, but instead last hit the enemy minion wave, you know, but either push faster than the opponent so that we are, you know, pushing forward, or alternatively, of course, we could, like, you know, if we're in a good enough position, actually stand in front of our minion wave, zone the enemy off, so that we're doing more damage to the wave even by just last hitting, because they're not getting to touch the wave at all. By doing that, we're going to build up a gigantic minion wave, and rather than crashing one minion wave into their turret at a time, we're going to crash 2 or 3, and now we're going to have a better chance at diving. They're going to have more minions in their way. You know, we're going to have more minions running into tower to take turret aggro, etc., etc. And if they get dove and killed successfully, even if you trade and end up dying as a result, they're going to lose more minions to the turret while they're gone, because you've built so many minions up to pile up under their turret at a time. So, you know, these are basic things that you want to do in regards to playing around your jungler, in regards to playing around your support. And then we should talk about, like, recalling. So it's also really important in League especially depending on how the lane is going, that we spend as much time as possible with an item advantage over our opponent, because even if two players earn the same amount of gold in a game, if one of them is constantly recalling ahead of the other one and is constantly sitting on an item advantage, one player could have earned 2,000 gold and the other player could have earned 2,000 gold. But if one went back, on wave 3 and bought a longsword, and so they got to spend the first 5 minutes of lane with the longsword versus the other person, and then the other person went back and they picked up like I don't know, pickaxe or something like that, and then this guy goes back and picks up a pickaxe at the same time, he's still got that longsword item advantage. Essentially what you're looking to do is spend almost the entire game, or as much of the game as possible. You're looking to spend as much of the game as possible with an item advantage over your opponent. And so the way that you enable that is by recalling slightly more than your opponent. You don't want to recall in a way where you're going to lose a ton of resources or CS or XP in order to recall, but you want to recall more frequently than your opponent. So how do we give ourselves the freest recall possible? So very important, these recall timings, because where I think a lot of players get lost is they want to take turret plates, but they don't know when they need to leave by. And so they have no sense of timing for when the enemy champions are going to come back into lane. And so a lot of times what they do is they wait and they just sit and hit the turret plating, and they hit the turret plating, or they just hit the turret to do damage to it. And then they react to when they should recall and finally leave when they see the other person coming back into lane. The problem with this is that if you leave when this other person's coming back into lane, they're just going to be able to shove one wave into your turret, and now they're going to trade turret plates back with you evenly, and you're going to be losing a minion wave to the turret just like they were losing a minion wave to the turret when you got the push initially, even though you were probably the one that initially killed them. So why are you trading minions and turret plates evenly with someone who is losing to you? Instead, you need to be making sure that your recall is completed like right as they're coming back into lane, like right when you first have the ability to see them, or preferably slightly before, so that you are coming back into lane and you're getting back into lane before they've had time to shove this minion wave into your turret. And so really what you should be doing is recalling. And this is kind of tricky because it depends. They've also just changed death timers again to be longer, like before. But essentially, you just have to develop a sense of timing. But really what you should be asking yourself is, when do I think they're going to get back into lane? And when do I need to recall in order to be recalled before they come back into lane? If you don't know, obviously there's not really a good way for me to like flowchart for you all of the many different situations at every different level that they could die at, and depending on the minion wave could be a certain size or not. So it's very complicated because there are thousands of different situations in which, depending on how big your minion wave is, or how big their minion wave is when they die, you need to make a decision. Do I even have time to shove the minion wave into the turret? There are some cases, especially early on when the death timers are really short, where you don't even have time to shove the minion wave into the enemy turret. This is usually because their wave is much bigger than yours, right? So a lot of times what you should do is you should thin the wave so that it doesn't crash into your turret, and then just recall without even having the opportunity to shove the wave into their turret. This is fine because even if you're missing some CS while you're gone, you're essentially creating a freeze here. Even though you're going to be gone and not able to last it, you're creating a freeze because their minion wave isn't going to crash into your turret. It's going to get stuck here. You're going to arrive before they have a chance to come back and break it, and they're going to be denied CS the whole time because they have a much bigger wave hitting your minions, so it's going to be killing your minions a lot faster. So this is really good if you don't have time to shove it all the way into their turret because their wave is so big. It's got 10, 11 minions, something like that. Now, if you feel like you have enough time to shove the wave into the turret, then you just push as fast as you can, get all the minions into the turret. And then in a lot of cases, right, depending on how long the death timer is and how long you think it is, you're going to back without even taking a plate, because you simply don't have time to take a plate every single time somebody dies. It's also really important to note that in the first 5 minutes of the game, top and mid turret have a 75% fortification bonus. It's not here anymore because we're much further into the game. But, you know, if we can actually do this and we'll see it. So for the first 5 minutes of the game, fortification blocks 75% of the incoming damage to these turrets. So that's really significant, right? And that's something that looks like exists. Oh, also on the bot turret. Oh, no, it doesn't. Okay, I was right. Just double checking. Yeah, it shouldn't exist on the bot turret. I don't know why I thought I clicked on this one, but apparently I didn't. So because that fortification exists, it's really important to recognize that especially in mid lane and top lane, you are even less likely early pre 5 minutes to be able to take a turret plate because you're going to do 75% reduced damage to the turret, which is quite a lot. And really important to note as well that mid lane is a very short lane. So because mid lane is so short, you have even less time to recall and get back into the lane because the minion waves will move quicker. Although I suppose you're a little bit faster to walk back into the lane as well. But regardless, essentially, like we said, some situations you're not even going to be able to touch the turret. Some situations you're going to be able to get the wave, or you're not even going to be able to shove the wave into the turret. You're just going to have to let it freeze. In some situations, you're going to be able to shove the wave into the turret but not take a plate. In some situations, you can get 1 plate, and in some situations, you can get 2 plates. It just depends. Usually, you have more time. Obviously, the smaller their minion wave is, and the bigger your minion wave is, and the earlier, or I mean, the later the level is. So if they've died and they're much higher level, you know, you're towards the end of laning phase, you're going to have more time. So, you know, that's the kind of the factors to keep in mind. The important thing is, like I said, there's going to be many different situations with many different sizes of minion waves, you know, and different level death timers and things like that. So what you really need to do is just make a conscious decision to say, I think this is a scenario where I can not push the wave into the turret at all, and so I'm going to just thin the wave and leave it here and then recall. And if it, you know, it looks like you actually did have time to shove the wave into the turret, then maybe, you know, consider doing that next time and learn from that. You say here, I think this is a situation where I can take 1 turret plate before they'll be back, and so you do that. Another trick, right, is that you can see the death timers, so you can see when the person respawns. And then, of course, it's a little bit hard to calculate because, you know, you don't know exactly how long it's going to take you to shove the wave. And they get home guards now if they've died early. So, you know, the exact timing is unclear, but it probably takes about 20 or 30 seconds to get back into lane. So if you see them respawn, you probably have time to only push about 1 more wave max when you see them come up. You know, with the player portraits, when you see that somebody's respawned, you probably only have, you know, 1 more wave that you can shove in before you just really have to be starting your recall. So just kind of keep that in mind and make a conscious attempt to decide when you're going to go for 1 plate or 2 plates or none, or shoving the wave into the turret, or just, you know, letting the wave freeze on your side and not shoving it at all. Make that decision consciously, and even if it's the wrong one, you'll get better at it over time by having done it. And then eventually you'll get, like I have, a really good sense of timing for when the enemy bot lane is about to show back up in the lane, you know, and when you need to have left by, and you'll just know kind of intuitively, okay, this is a 1 plate play, or this is a 2 plate play, or this, you know, this is early enough that we can't even shove this gigantic wave in, just need to thin it and leave it, or this is a situation where, you know, we can shove all the way into their turret, but we can't take any plates. And you just kind of need to know that intuitively, and it's really important because it's going to allow you to get those recalls off consistently that let you get that item advantage over your opponent after you've killed them. One of the biggest mistakes that people make with their laning and their recall timings and wave management in League is that they'll get an advantage in lane, they'll get that kill, but then they'll overstay to take an extra turret plating or something like that, and then their recalls will get canceled, or they'll just, get stuck staying in lane when they're like half HP, half mana, haven't spent any of the gold advantage that they've earned, and the enemy is back with a fresh recall having spent all of their gold, so the enemy is now actually ahead of them even though they're winning the game. And it can be very difficult to find a free recall, because most of the way that we find a free recall is by shoving the wave all the way into the enemy turret. But if we're half HP, half mana, down items, and now kind of in a losing position in lane, it can be very difficult to do that. The other way, of course, is if we kill them and leave the minion wave in a spot where it's essentially frozen, like we talked about, that can allow you to essentially take a free recall as well. But that's going to be very difficult to do, because you're probably not very likely to kill them again if they have the item advantage and health advantage and mana advantage on you. So it's really crucial to actually secure your lead, that you don't just play lane well enough to get ahead by getting a kill, but you actually protect your lead or secure your lead, or actually kind of finish obtaining your lead by recalling at the right time and getting the item advantage that you earned by recalling at the right time. And recall timing's all about wave management, because if you shove the wave into the enemy turret, you're going to lose very, very few minions, maybe one or two for a recall. If you do the freezing thing, right, if you're in a situation where you have to do that, it's a little bit worse. You'll probably lose more than 2 minions, but it's still your best option in that situation, because you can't shove all the way into the enemy turret. Otherwise, you'll get caught in lane in that situation where you can no longer be in lane. So, and there are times where, even though it's not optimal, right, you do just sometimes have to recall, even if it means that the opponent's going to shove a whole wave into your turret that you're just going to lose. It's really bad. You should reflect on how you ended up in that situation in the first place. But it definitely happens sometimes. So that's important to keep in mind as well, that's just kind of something that'll happen sometimes. Still better to recall than to kill yourself, but not ideal, and not really a fundamental part of good wave management, because it's really a problem with the way that you've played the lane at that point. So I hope that this helps. Get recalls off at the right times. Take the amount of turret plates that you can actually get. Don't ever get caught in lane overstaying. And use your minion waves to avoid ganks and help set up ganks for your jungler by paying attention to your jungler on the map and paying attention where the enemy jungler has shown on the map or not shown, and enable your support, if you're in bot lane, to play better by setting them up with a minion wave that can help them be successful, as well as making sure that you're maintaining that item advantage over your opponents with successful recalling. And I think there was one other thing in here as well. Make it harder for them to dive you by thinning waves. And, push minion waves to get a huge level advantage that can allow you to all-in your opponent and win. Maximize denying your opponent CS through the use of freezing and shoving waves into turret. Yeah, and that's about it. So I hope that that's helpful. Good luck in solo queue, and have a wonderful day.